Om Shanti, which means Om, I am, and Shanti means peace. So it's a lovely greeting of peace, and it's also actually an introduction to the self. Who am I? I am that inner being of peace. When we usually introduce ourselves, then it's a physical introduction. Where was I born? How old is this body? What my profession is? Where do I live? All of these external things. But tonight we're going to be exploring the inner being. Who is this being inside that is speaking? Because I'm not just bones and flesh and a computer here, but there's something else. There's a spark of light, a spark of consciousness, an inner being that is not visible. Just reflect for a moment. Who's the one who's thinking and feeling, experiencing, remembering? Where is this personality? What is this personality? You begin to ask yourself this question, well, who am I? And you go deeper and deeper and deeper within. And finally, hopefully, you come to the conclusion that there's this invisible energy that's just here. And at the moment, I'm not explaining the detail of this to you, but just try it as an experiment and see what happens. When you focus on that inner being here and let yourself feel that inner being of peace, you really touch into the being that you are. And once you're able to connect with yourself, that really is a huge, huge step in your whole journey in life. It's strange to think that 20 years, 40 years, 60 years, however long it's been, I've been occupying this body, I haven't actually known who I am. And when you don't know who you are, one of the things that happens is that you lose confidence in yourself, you feel insecure, and guess what is one of the big issues of today, the big problem of today? Identity crisis. Do you agree? A lot of people go through this, and not just young people, but it can be a middle life age crisis. It can be something that comes when you're a teenager. It can happen at any time. Any time that you start thinking about who you really are and what actually is there within you, go on that journey inside and discover. Then there's no more insecurity. There's a dignity that comes that nobody can take away from you, whether it's because of age, whether it's because of color or religion, any of these external things. But I know who I am, and I'm stable in that awareness of who I am. And in this consciousness of the inner being, I have that inner strength in which nobody can take that dignity away from me, but also I'm able to keep my inner stage of self-esteem. But something very beautiful also happens after that. When I see others, I don't see them on the external level. What are the clothes they're wearing? What is the color of their eyes, the color of their hair? No, I'm looking here at the center of the forehead, and I'm seeing that being of light, the soul that they are. Because I'm in that awareness of my own eternal identity, I see others with that same vision. And when you relate to another person with that vision of seeing the soul, then the barriers that existed before, plus all the misconceptions, we carry so much baggage. And when we label people and put them in boxes, then all that baggage connected with that box comes out. And it's not very pleasant. And it can lead to a lot of conflict. It can lead to wars. It can lead to breakdown. And so to come to know the self and relate to others in that way and be able to see them as shining stars, not physical bodies, brings peace to me, but also it allows peace to be shared with you and with everybody else around me. And so the starting point of peace is knowing that I am, in my original state of being, that being of peace. And when I stay in that awareness, then relationships become much, much sweeter, not just peaceful, but there's a different communication, a communication of respect and regard. I might not know you, but if I'm seeing you with that vision of respect, you can feel those vibrations. Human beings can feel, not just see, but more than that, when you're in the presence of somebody, you can feel if they have good feelings for you, good wishes for you, and you can also feel it if they don't. And in fact, you can, when it's the negative, you can feel those arrows hitting you even at a distance. Vibrations don't recognize walls. Vibrations can pass through walls. But when there are good feelings, you can also definitely feel it. We've just been through Christmas, the New Year, and probably many of you sent greetings to 100 people, more than 100 people, in which you said something like, well, I'm sending you my good wishes for the coming year. Something like that, and if not those words. So how do I do that? When I actually create pure feelings in the inner being, then I'm actually able to send good wishes to others. So having that awareness of the inner being of the soul is not just peace of mind for me, but it also helps to change the quality of interaction and relationships with everybody else around me. But there's something else that also happens. Check it out for yourself. I don't need you to respond to me on any level, but you haven't been angry recently, have you? I'm sure you haven't. But I'm also pretty sure that in the past, at some point of time, you would have known anger. I was in a strange situation where I actually only experienced real anger when I was around 21, 22, something like that. 22, I think. Prior to that, I'd got upset with people, I'd got irritated, but it was never really anger as such. And when I started experiencing anger for what I thought was the right reason, things were not being done as they should, things were going wrong, and it was somebody else's fault, and I genuinely thought it was somebody else's fault. And so I started to get angry. And it took me a long time to realize that anger is actually damaging, not only for the soul. Anger is also damaging for relationships. Anger is damaging for the environment, the atmosphere around me. But anger is also damaging my physical health. Your blood pressure goes up, your heart rate goes up, and things begin to go wrong within your system. It's a direct connection of the psyche with the body. And you begin to see the connection of psyche and soma, psychosomatic illness. I don't know if there are doctors in the room, but probably they would tell you maybe 75%, some would say even more, 80%, 90%, of all illnesses start in the mind. And keeping your mind peaceful and calm and happy is absolutely fundamental to good health. And where I don't stay aware of this, that's when you hear about heart attacks and all the damage that comes in. Not just that, but in many other ways in terms of the reaction of the body. A medical person once told me that if you're involved in a near collision in a car accident, not your fault at all, but whoever, and it's nearly an accident, by the grace of God, you're saved and it doesn't happen. But the impact in terms of the bodily response, in terms of the physiology, is almost the same as actually having been in an accident. Yes, there aren't any bones broken for sure, but the inner response in terms of the psyche and the physiology is almost the same. And so the things that we go through in our lives, the trauma that we experience, there are bodily responses and reactions to everything that happens. The mind is reacting, but the body is also reacting. And while it might be things of the past that I don't recall in detail now, and maybe it's things that are indelibly printed in my mind, and they keep coming up at different times. So dealing with trauma is a very specific thing, and I won't go into that too much now. But this aspect that if I can keep my mind light and easy and happy, it's going to make a huge difference to my health and my well-being. And so the art of meditation is very specifically for this. Some of you might be aware, but maybe not everyone. Around the 7th of December last year, the UN issued an announcement. And as I say, I don't know how far the UN announcements reach people, or they don't. But this announcement was something that we were very interested in, because it stated that all the governments at the General Assembly at the UN had agreed that there should be a day specifically dedicated for meditation. You know, like you have a Women's Day, you have a day for sports, you have, you've been hearing about Yoga Day, well, and that's on the 21st of June every year. But now there's also World Meditation Day, which started last year, 21st December. And why that was interesting for me is because the UN is a political body. It's got nothing to do with spirituality and religion. But the governments of the world, it wasn't just your people of the streets, but it was people representing their governments. So the governments of the world actually agreed that in terms of inner peace and well-being and good health, meditation is important. And so they declared 21st December to be World Meditation Day. And in fact, we were able to put together a program. We've got a lovely auditorium like this in London. I'm sure they put on a program here too. But in London, the program we had was just a few minutes explanation and then the meditation for an hour. And over the space of about 2-3 days, and I haven't gone back to check it since, but I was curious for the first couple of days, we had about 8,000 hits. And I know that in some cases it was a group of people who were meditating, not just 1 or 2 individuals. And so over 8,000 hits within the space of a couple of days. Now, that's telling me that governments are in agreement that, yes, meditation is needed, but people are also interested in the whole subject of meditation. I studied meditation in India and came back to London, to my home. And this was by then 1969. And meditation had just come on the scene. Those of you who are my age will remember the Beatles ushered in meditation by going to India and bringing back their guru here. And so meditation had just started, but meditation was really being seen as something for people on the fringe. The hippies, the alternative style people, later they called it the New Age people, things like this. But today, meditation is absolutely part of the establishment. And some would even say, oh, it's fashionable to meditate. And so meditation has taken on a whole new role and significance through the years that I've been connected. And so what do I do when I meditate? I've told you about the benefits for the mind, the body, relationships, the workplace. If relationships at the workplace and the atmosphere in the workplace are harmonious and peaceful and respectful, productivity increases. So it's good for the boss, it's good for the company, it's good for everybody who's part of that situation, all my colleagues, because you wake up on Monday morning and you think, I have to go back to work, instead of thinking, oh my goodness, I have to face those people again. Big, big difference. And meditation really does create that state of harmony and a healing. In some languages, the word meditation is connected with medicare, the process of healing. And so yes, if there can be an healing energy, then it's going to be one in which everybody is able to benefit. So how do I meditate? First step, coming back here to the awareness of the being that I am, the being that's thinking and feeling. Second step, and maybe in some places I wouldn't talk about this immediately, but I think here it's an atmosphere in which most people probably would agree. But the second step is to connect with the divine, the supreme being, the being who is the source of all the positive attributes that you can think of. Peace and love, purity and joy and truth, all the positive qualities you can possibly think about. Make a list of them, and all of these are within that one supreme being who is the source of all of these positive attributes. Which means that, yes, going inside and letting myself become calm and still, I'm able to feel the peace, which is my natural state of being. But connecting with the divine means I now have access to an unlimited source, which means I can take more and more peace, but beyond peace, I can take more and more love, I can take more and more wisdom. In fact, whatever other qualities I would like to have in my life, I can take those from this connection. And the image we use is very simple. For the self, the being of light, the spark of energy here, but equally the source, the supreme, the being of light, the incorporeal, the one without a physical form, and therefore the one out of the cycle of human action and activity and the whole process of birth and death, and I would say also rebirth. Not everybody understands that concept, but certainly I would say that this is a cycle that all human souls are caught up in. Birth and death and rebirth and another and another and another, and the cycle is endless, eternal. But there's one soul, the Supreme, who is not part of the cycle of birth and death. And that is the soul we are connecting with in meditation. And let me specify, we call this Raj Yoga meditation. Raja, the sovereign, the supreme, and so connecting with the highest, yoga, union, connection, communion, and so union with the highest, the supreme. And it also means that when I connect with the highest, what comes back to me is not only these other qualities, but in particular, spiritual power. And when I experience that power growing within myself, it's power over the self. It's not power over anyone else. But the power over the self means I'm now the master, the sovereign, the ruler of this physical body. Just imagine the length of the tongue is, I reckon, about 2.5 inches. That's it. But 2.5 inches can drive a person insane. You might be 6 feet tall, but the tongue, 2.5 inches, controls you. I won't go into the detail. You can understand. Both ways, whether it's addictions to food or whether it's my tongue running before my head has a chance to think. That also happens and gets us into trouble. So to be the master of my physical senses, but something much more precious than that. To be the master of my thoughts. Can you imagine being the master of your thoughts? It's possible. Being the master of your feelings, so that you don't have a day which is not as it should be, a day in which you're moody and you're difficult to approach and people say, better not talk to him today, not in such a good mood, try it later this afternoon. But to have a state of inner being which is stable, consistent, constant. Now all of that happens through the mastery that comes by yoga, the power that we are able to gain. So the master not only of my thoughts and feelings, my memories, my personality, to be able to move all that in a way that I would like to move, in a way that's positive and benevolent and beneficial. So this is a very brief introduction to the whole subject, but I'd like you all to experience this, and there will be somebody who's speaking a little bit of a commentary to guide you in that direction. And so just let the body sit comfortably, the position in which the body is balanced. Best is both feet on the ground, and yes, both hands on your knees, so that then again the body doesn't distract you, but it's comfortable and peaceful. And just see what happens as you go on this journey. Thank you for your attention. And about halfway through, I will exit and somebody else will come. So don't be alarmed. It's not a sudden change because of something that's happened, but it's part of the program. Thank you. in this awareness of I, the inner being, I stay connected with the source, and from the source come rays of peace and love that reach not only me, but they reach out to every human being and those who connect and stay in this awareness can feel the peace and love reaching them. This is the Buddhi Yoga, the yoga, the union of the intellect. And with this awareness of peace and love coming from the One, I absorb these qualities deeply. The peace and love reach all living creatures, all species under the sun, and peace and love touches every particle of the natural elements of the earth, peace and love return to this planet of ours. We continue to stay connected with the source and be instruments to share this with all.